past several years have been marked by extravagant money printing, leading to some of the worst inflation numbers that we've seen in decades. We've seen prices increase for almost every item you can think of, but is this all about to change? And are we about to enter a period of deflation instead of inflation? Well, before we deep dive into this topic, I'm Matt from Liquid Loans, and in this video, we'll break down the arguments for an upcoming deflationary environment.
Deflation.
Deflation may not be as newsworthy as its counterpart inflation, but it plays a crucial role in the economy. At its core, deflation is a decrease in the general price level of goods and services. Now, this may sound good at first because who doesn't love a sale or bargain, right? But deflation actually can be quite detrimental to an economy because when prices are constantly dropping, it can lead to a downward spiral of decreased spending and economic growth. Consumers may hold off on making purchases, waiting for prices to drop even further, leading to decreased demand and ultimately lower production. And this can lead to layoffs and a lack of investment in new businesses. So how could such a dramatic change in the financial outlook happen? Let's take a look at the M2 money supply over the past 30 years, which is money that includes cash, checking accounts, and non-cash assets that are easily convertible to cash. As you can see in this chart from Fred Economic Data, the M2 money supply has increased steadily over the past several decades, and we can see that around 2020, during that kind of thing that we're not really allowed to discuss too much here on YouTube. Anyway, the amount of the M2 money supply that competes for goods and services spiked significantly, leading to the amount of money in the system increasing by a whopping 25%. Now, let's not forget, at this exact time, governments across the globe were locking everything down, which broke supply chains, decreasing supply and leading to the consumer price inflation that we've all really enjoyed over the past 2 years. Sarcasm alert. Understanding this parabolic increase in money supply and consumer price inflation can help us predict whether or not we will see the complete opposite in the future. After all, what goes up typically comes down, and that includes the money supply too. So let's transition to this paper by the Federal Reserve in June of 2022, which attempts to explain the spike in the M2 money supply observed from 2020 to 2022. And surprisingly, it isn't as simple as governments just printing more money. The paper is titled Understanding Bank Deposit Growth During the first factor they cite is the initial spike in commercial and industrial credit line drawdowns at the onset. What this indicates is that businesses were nervous at the beginning of this period in time and sought out cash from their banks in the event of an emergency, and since they took out this cash, it added to the M2 money supply increase. In addition, the Federal Reserve started buying up assets, which led to the creation of reserves in the banking system at banks such as JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs. Essentially, the Fed was buying assets such as treasuries and mortgage-backed securities from non-bank entities, aka normal people, which were converted to cash by these folks and then deposited into the banks, and therefore this also increased the M2 money supply. Additionally, banks brought up assets as well, transferring cash from the banks into the hands of your average everyday person, further increasing the money supply. And finally, individual households became more likely to hold on to savings in the form of deposits on top of received stimulus payments, which they also held in the same manner. So what does all this mean, and why does this matter for deflation? Right now, the Fed is no longer buying assets, which transfers money to the hands of everyday people and increases the M2 money supply. Instead, they're selling, which transfers money back to them and decreases M2. In addition, we have rising interest rates, which discourages borrowing, which decreases the amount of money in circulation, and furthermore, with widespread belief of worsening recession, banks become less likely to lend, further decreasing the circulating money supply. So where's the evidence, and how could we experience deflation when it's so obvious we're in a serious inflationary environment? Well, let's look back at the first chart of the M2 money supply that I showed you earlier. If you were paying attention before, you noticed that the trend of increasing the M2 money supply actually reversed around the start of 2022, a trend that's not been seen in this chart's history. We are seeing this trend in large part due to the fact that the Fed is doing quantitative tightening, aka they are selling off their assets for cash. This means that money is being taken out of the M2 money supply from your average person and into the hands of the Fed. We also have to consider what the banks are doing with credit. Each of the past 5 recessions have seen bank credit flatten or even go negative. Now, bank lending is still on the rise, but we could see a reversal in the near future due to rising interest rates or increasing fear of recession, which would further decrease the M2 money supply. There are definitely some other factors that can affect deflation that we have not discussed yet, with supply certainly being one of the reasons why consumer price inflation has happened. We could see an increased supply in goods and services, further promoting deflation, but even without it, aggregate demand, or the M2 money supply, can fall so drastically that it nullifies any supply concerns. One of the most concerning factors is interest rates. We all know that interest rates have been rising, but few know they've been rising faster than in any period before in US history, and it's conceivable that the markets have not had time to adjust to such a rapid change. So will we see deflation in the coming years? Well, nothing can be for certain, and macroeconomics is simply a game of weighing probabilities, but it is likely that we will have disinflation, which is when serious price inflation slows down temporarily from the levels we've experienced over the past few years. And if we have an environment where people desperately hold onto their cash in fears of further economic downturn, this will result in decreased spending. So that wraps up this video, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on the topic of deflation in the comments below. Also, if you like content like this, do hit that subscribe button and that bell icon so you're notified every time we drop new content on the channel. You can also tap the like button, and why not share this video with someone who you think it may benefit. I'm Matt from Liquid Loans. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next one.